aware of all the ways you can work with your dreams? Well, I'm fond of repeating a quote from the great dream maker Jeremy Taylor, who said, "All dreams reflect our inborn creativity and our ability to face and solve life's problems." Well, to that end, we can use our dreams for insights into how we react to situations, deal with our emotions, face anything we have in our life, medical issues, or use them how to come up with creative ideas, just to name a few. Recently, I became aware of a way of working with our dreams that I'd never heard of before, and it kind of piqued my curiosity. Angel Pretot is a language teacher with a unique method of how to learn French easily and effectively. One of the offshoots of his program is that he found his English speaking students starting to have dreams in French. He's here today to tell us what this means and what we can learn from this. Welcome to the Dream Power Experience, Angel.
Thank you for having me, Debbie. I'm so happy to be here.
Oh, I'm so happy to have you too, because I love talking about dreams, and having dreaming in French when we speak in English is kind of a unique thing. But let's start at the beginning, Angel. What made you decide to become a language teacher?
It's something I did quite early in my career. At some point, I was in university and I had to choose a profession, and I decided to study how to become a language teacher. And I might have become an English teacher for French speakers. That's something that I also did in the past, but eventually I decided to specialize in the opposite, teaching French to English speakers and to foreigners in general. So that is my master's degree. And eventually I built my own business where now my specialty is really completely to teach French to people who speak English. They don't have to be natives, but most of my clients are natives,
Okay, and
native English speakers.
why do you think it's a good idea in general for people to learn foreign languages?
Oh, foreign languages in general. Well, I mean, I'm biased. I speak 6 languages myself, so obviously I have a bias for foreign languages and languages in general. It's really a much bigger opening on the world. You will have access to many more different cultures and also different ways of thinking. I know that for myself, if I am thinking of an issue that I have or trying to find a solution for something, if I think of that problem in English or if I think about it in French, it will give me different sorts of perspectives on it, because the way that the French would look at a situation is culturally different from the way that English speakers, for example, Americans, look at the same issue, and they will find different solutions. So you will have a lot more insights in ways to lead your life, not to mention all of the opportunities for traveling that you unlock, because sometimes when you're abroad and you only speak English, it can feel a little bit restrictive. You know, you can only go to so many restaurants because you have to have the menu in English and you have to have waiters who speak English. And if you want a tour, it has to be in English. And just not everything is in English in the world yet, and perhaps never, you know?
Right. Well, I want to get back to what you said about solving problems using different languages. And you
Yes.
say it's a cultural thing. It's not just the language itself, but it's all the other cultural aspects that help in that connection.
Yes. So the culture and the language are really not separable. Although one language can have different cultures. For example, you know that the American culture and the culture of the UK is very different despite speaking the same language. But like I know, for example, that if I had never learned English, I would probably never have been able to build a business, because it's just not something that is valued or appreciated or even really understood in the French culture, as in the culture of France as a country.
You mean there are no entrepreneurs in France?
There are, but typically there will be a family that has already entrepreneurs. It's just not something that is valued. Like in my family, my parents tried everything they could to stop me from having a business, believe it or not, when I was younger. And it's only when I was more grown up and living abroad that I was like, hey, I'm gonna do whatever I want because you can't stop me. But for my parents, it was like the recipe for total life failure was to start a business. I don't know why. I
Very,
mean, it's just the way they think, you know.
yeah, it's very interesting. But when did you realize that your students were dreaming in French?
It's something that I first realized for myself because I English is the first language that I learned and then I learned Spanish and then German. And I know that when I start dreaming in the language that I am learning, it's a sign that my capacity in the language is getting good. And sometimes it's way before I have this impression in real life. In real life, when you learn a language, you just constantly have the feeling that you suck. It's a very disempowering thing. And sometimes it's good to have the feedback of, other students or your coach or someone like that to tell you how good your French or the language that you're learning actually is. Because constantly, even when you speak a foreign language, if you're not super fluent, you will feel like you suck. I've had conversations where I was with a friend of mine who was a native English speaker, and we were speaking Spanish, just for fun to practice a little bit. And my wife at the time was listening to that conversation. She doesn't speak any Spanish. And she asked after we had the conversation, okay, like, what was that about? And my friend told her, oh, what it's about is that Angel speaks great Spanish and I suck. And I was like, okay, that's interesting because my feeling is that you speak amazing Spanish and I suck. And so it's interesting when you start dreaming that you speak the language that you learn, because it's a moment when you're like, oh, I could actually speak in my dream. And sometimes you can speak in your dream. Actually, almost always you can speak in your dream better than you can speak in waking life.
Okay, so when your students started to tell you that they were dreaming in French, I guess you weren't surprised then because you already had this knowledge from your own
Yes, I'm
learning.
never surprised. I'm like, okay, good for you. That is a great start. And they know it's a great start, because if they wake up and they're like, oh, I was dreaming in French, it will always surprise them in a nice way.
So what happened the first time when they realized this?
It can be confusing a little bit for them because they don't think that they speak French, but sometimes they have dreams where they're completely fluent. So the reason why it happens is that when you're awake, you're always monitoring what you do and being self-conscious and just trying to do things right. And when you're dreaming, you have none of that. And so it's quite a bit of mental processing, mental power that is taken for monitoring yourself and trying to do the right thing and so on, which causes you to feel like you struggle. But if you're dreaming, you don't feel like you struggle at all. You're just, I mean, sometimes you can dream that you struggle, as I'm sure you know, but most often you're just in the dream. And even if it's completely incoherent, it's fine.
So do any of your students tell you about the contents of the dream, what they're actually dreaming about?
That happens sometimes, yes, but mostly that conversation is like, wow, I was speaking French in my dream and much better than real life. And I'm like, yeah, it's normal. It's a sign that your French is actually pretty good and much better than you think.
Yeah. So are they just, speaking words, or are they having conversations? Is it, like the same type of thing that if they were dreaming in, their own native language?
Pretty much. It's rarely just words. I'm sure it can happen to have just some words in French, but that would happen even to beginners. The people that have the experience of actually feeling like they speak French, they have entire conversations. I've had conversations in my dreams in languages that the people I had the conversation with do not speak in real life. Like one day I called a friend and I was like, hey, I dreamt about you and you were speaking French. And he was like, I don't.
And
I
they've
know you
never
don't,
spoke
but
and
yeah.
they've never spoken those languages.
No, but it's my dream, so my brain makes up whatever.
Right. Right. So you don't really help them really get into the dreams and understand the dreams. They kind of do that on their own.
Yeah, it's not really something that I work with. It's definitely something I would like to explore in the future. It's one of the many aspects that I would like to explore. I have been working with energy healing quite a bit in my coaching practice. And so, of course, working with dreams is a sort of similar or related aspect to that. But I find that there are a number of challenges in working with dreams, which first you need people to actually remember them, and then you need to like lead them through the symbolism. So I'm still studying that.
Okay, well let's talk a bit about your dreams. So Your
Yes.
native language then is French, correct?
Yes, absolutely.
So when you dream in English, for example, uh, you said that it's a different kind of dream from when you would dream in French. What about
Mm,
dream in German?
Not necessarily. I wouldn't say it's a different kind of dreams. That is more when I think in French or in English or in German in waking life that I think differently, but I wouldn't say that this is reflected in the dreams. For me, I speak mostly English in my daily life. Most of what I do is in English, so also most of my dreams are in English. But any language that I am able to speak, even not too well, can just show up in a dream kind of randomly.
Hey, I see that. And if let's say, for example, you speak one of the languages you speak is German or
Yes,
European language. So
German, Spanish, both. Yeah.
so when you find that you're dreaming in German, is it because you've immersed yourself in German, that particular day?
No, I mean, it could probably happen, but I've never noticed a trend like that. But I live in Austria, where the people speak German. So even though I don't particularly enjoy speaking German myself, if I go just buy something, or if I go to a restaurant or any kind of daily life thing on the outside, I will have a conversation in German. So of course that gets then reprocessed and can show up in the dreams in different ways.
Okay. And how soon after your students start to learn the language do they find themselves dreaming in French?
That can be, I mean, my students, I would say it happens relatively fast because also I have a method of really fast learning. But if you just pick a language learning app and expect to start dreaming in French at some point, I can't tell you that it will ever happen. It might not. But yeah, I think most of my students end up having dreams in French, but they don't always tell me.
And do you ever get the sense that they get frightened by having these dreams in a different language?
I've never seen someone be frightened by it. It's always a feeling of, oh, wow, I could do that.
So it's kind of a validation.
Yes, absolutely. It's a very validating experience.
Well, Angel, your method of teaching languages is a little bit different from a lot of the ways that languages are taught. You've come up with a four-step method for how to do it. So let's talk about that a bit.
Yes, absolutely. So after a number of years of teaching and also learning languages myself and seeing who was successful with learning languages, around me and who was not, I've come up with a method that is really 4 steps. It's not so much 4 steps that you do in order, but more like a circle that you repeat. And I've noticed that all of the methods that are not very efficient are missing one or several of those 4 steps. If you have the 4 steps, you're good. So the 4 steps, it's SAIS, and I have chosen that in part because it spells the words say, like je sais, that means I know in French. So that's selection, activation, immersion, and safe practice. So selection is perhaps the most important step and the step that is missing in, I think, most language learning method that I have observed. Basically, the idea is that if you are a high school student versus if you are a medical doctor versus an international lawyer versus you name it, or a retired person just wanting to travel, the language that you will actually need to speak is going to be very different. So for example, for my lawyer students, it's not really relevant to learn the names of all the vegetables at the market. But for someone who is a cook, and I've had several students who are cooks, it will actually be interesting to know a lot more than just the names of the vegetables, but cooking techniques and everything. So you get the idea that it's really important to choose what you learn before learning it. And that's a step that I've just not seen methods and teachers doing. It's always, oh, you have a book and that's what it is, or you have an app and the app just feeds you some words that hopefully aren't too random, but at the end of the day, they're kind of random because depending on who you are, these are not the things that you need to learn. So that's why selection is super important. And if you get that right, I would say you're 80% of the way there because it's the 80-20 principle that 80% of your results come from 20% of your efforts. here in the selection, that is when you select the 20% that will actually bring you the main results. So that's super important. After you have selected things, you have the step that I call activation. This is related to how the brain works. So certainly, since you are a dream coach, you know about manifesting and all of that. And basically, you need to first set a goal and somehow visualize it or activate it in your mind to be led there. So that is what the activation step corresponds to in the language learning method. Concretely, it means that you pick some things that you have selected, and it can be grammar structures or vocabulary words or even ways of having a conversation, and you have to study them constantly, not constantly, sorry, consciously. Just once could be enough, might not be, but you have to at least do it consciously, because otherwise the first step for selection has just not been very useful if you don't consciously activate what you have chosen. That is useful because then in the third step, which is immersion, that is when you will use all of the subconscious power of your brain, which is basically you have to have some French in your life, or whichever language that you're learning. You have to have that in your life every day. So for every one of my clients that I work one-on-one with, I choose some podcasts and some YouTube channels that are always related to their topic of interest. And I tell them, okay, this is what you want to be watching with. It's good to use content that is made for natives. And if you don't understand anything, especially at the beginning, it's fine. You don't have to understand anything. You just have to have it in the background. So now your brain knows, okay, that's a thing. You have two languages, and sometimes you don't understand much, but it's okay. That's not the goal. The goal is to have it there. The great thing is that when you start relaxing about it, you will start realizing that you actually understand a lot more than you would ever think. But I like that to be more like a nice surprise, and I don't insist too much on that, because otherwise that is when people are thinking, oh my God, I have to understand. You don't have to. Even if you understand 0%, it's okay. But I would be very surprised if you told me you understand 0%. There has to be more than that, even at the very beginning. Also because French and English are just not as different as we think they are once we realize all of the things they have in common. And the last one is super important too, because if you do the first three perfectly, what will happen is that you will become a great passive knower of the language. So you'll be able to understand and perhaps to read if you practice also reading in immersion, but you won't be able to speak, which most people, when they learn a language, their goal is to speak. So then that is when step 4 comes in. And it's not just practice, it's safe practice. And not just so if we have the S for SAIS, but also because I have noticed that it's very often missing in the situation in which people learn languages. There's always more danger than would be ideal. Typically,
So,
if you're
I wouldn't think that learning a language would either be safe or unsafe. So let's talk about
it's
that.
fundamentally, it's not something that we feel is safe at a psychological level. If you think of how the primal humans existed, they had their tribe, and that was like one family, and no one would have think that it is safe to run away from the first tribe that you have, with their language, their culture, their everything, and just go to another one and try to get accepted. It's a bad idea. Okay, like at the primal level, you don't do that. You stick with your group and hope, because that's your best chance of survival. So at the core, it's just something that we are not naturally prone to doing. We are naturally curious, so some of us will want to try and do it, but we better make sure that it's safe first. So that is, part of why it has to be safe practice. And if you think about most people when they first learn a language, they are in middle school or high school. That is horrible. That is when you have the worst peer pressure that exists, to not make a fool of yourself, to try and, act like other people want you to act, and just not take risks and really try to fit in, or take the risks that are accepted by your group, right? A lot of people would try to learn a language in a professional setting, for example. I mean, I don't know if you do that in the US, but in Europe, we do that a lot, that people will have language classes, English classes, for example, at their job, and you don't want to make a fool of yourself in front of your colleagues. It's bad. And even worse, perhaps some people actually learn the language directly in the country. A lot of people say it's the best method. And it can be a very good method. It can be very effective, but you better not be scared, because then you have, it's like doing circus without safety net.
Okay,
Whatever
so
happens, happens.
okay, so what is a safe way?
So a safe practice is really having a container. So that's what I try really hard to do in my business. I have my individual classes and my group classes, and all of those are places where whatever you say, it's okay. The worst thing that will happen is that I will tell you, well, if you're in a real life situation, you don't want to say that because you just made some sexual advances to this person unknowingly, it's things like that. Or you said the opposite of what you wanted to say, which, sometimes happen because it can be just a little, thing in the sentence that makes it different. Or, yeah, it does not mean what you think it means. And clearly you just, requested some completely different dish than what you would have requested if you had been able to say what you wanted to say. So it's the place where nothing bad can happen to you, like nothing. You can't even make a fool of yourself because everyone else is in the same situation. Well, except me, I guess, but don't worry, I'm also in that situation day in, day out when I'm outside trying to speak German to people and things like that. So I bring both the experience of being able to teach to people and having learned it and knowing what it's like, and also the grace, maybe, I don't know how to call that, but just the ability to hold a space that is safe where nothing bad can happen and you can experiment with any kind of new structure or new sentence. And also because I'm very experienced in working with English speakers, I generally know what they mean, even though they don't say what they were meaning in the first place. So that's really what I encourage you to do. If you want to learn a language, you absolutely need some kind of safe practice. So if you have, for example, a friend who's willing to help you learn the language, willing and able to help you learn the language, then you might want to practice with that friend, for example, because they will be very kind and understanding to you.
And you also said before that one of the things you do is I guess tailor your classes to the person. Like you said, this person is a cook, you have more
Yes.
food related things and that kind of thing. So, but you also said that you have group classes. So you have
Yes.
one-on-one in group. How does that work?
So I originally started with one-on-one, and I still do one-on-one. I use basically those 4 steps. The selection is something that I mostly do myself if we're working one-on-one. I have this process called the roadmap to fluency, which is really, I spend the first hour of our coaching relationship asking you questions and gathering as much information as I can about your life and what you will want to learn, so that I can make a plan for you. Then I send you the plan and we work that plan together. So if you're a lawyer or a doctor or a cook or any profession, I mean, I've had so many different professions at this stage, you will have a plan that looks differently, and then we work that together. And then after 3 years and a half of doing that, I figured, okay, maybe I can find a way to package this and make it into an online course so people can use it for themselves and it doesn't have to cost so much and it doesn't have to be so limited, because I only ever have 7 spots at the same time for one-on-one clients, just because I'm just me. It's just one of me. So I've noticed that if I take more than 7, it just becomes a bit more all over the place. And I really, really want to be focused. So what I did is, like, I had repeated that process of creating the roadmap for people so many times that I was able to make it into workshops for people to actually follow the process themselves. And that's what became my French Fluency Accelerator. I have made a lot more workshops so far. I think we have maybe 25 to date, because I like to add a lot more content. It's a lot about grammar, a lot of, how to become fluent. There's one about energy clearing. There's one about manifesting with the French language, or manifesting the French language. And just a lot of like workshops, but the first 3 are the essential parts of the program. And then I've added 2 classes per week for the students who are in that program to come and practice with me. So they have to follow the process to make their roadmap. I will give them feedback because I'm always here to answer any questions about anything really for my students. And then they get to come to the class up to twice a week if they want, and participate and speak and follow their own roadmap.
So do you think it's because the way you've structured your program with the emphasis on manifestation, that actually also helps promote the dreams in French?
It might. The interesting part is that I wasn't trying to structure it with an emphasis on manifestation. The workshop about manifestation was like the 10th that I've had it. And at the time, the way that I was choosing the workshops, I was making one per month, and the students were voting for the next topic that was most important. And one day I just thought, oh, maybe I could make a workshop about manifesting. And I added that to my list of things they could vote for. And believe it or not, they all voted for it. And then I had to make it. And so it became this like over 2 hours list of different processes that you can use with manifesting, or to manifest the French language, or to use the French language to manifest. And then in the course of making that workshop, I figured, okay, one of those techniques is energy clearing. And I said during the workshop, well, maybe I could also make a workshop about energy clearing. So that was added to the list. And guess what happened? Next month, boom, they all voted for it. So that became a part of the work. And I also have meditation tracks on my YouTube channel that are available for everyone. So that also, there's also an energy clearing track on that YouTube channel. But that wasn't really my intention to structure it in a sort of manifesting way. It's just that at the same time as I was creating those processes, years before creating the program, I was creating my own business. So I was manifesting my business. And I couldn't help but notice that it was basically the same process to manifest a business or to manifest a foreign language. It's the same kind of steps. And that's how it ended up being formalized in those 4.
Okay. Well, Angel, is there a final thought you have that you like to leave with our audience?
Well, I have my motto that I can share with everyone. My motto is have fun now, don't mortgage the future. And it's intentionally said this way with no preposition in the middle, because it could be have fun now, but don't mortgage the future, meaning your fun now must not be paid for tomorrow, right? But it also can be have fun now so you don't mortgage the future, because the only way that you'll be happy in the future is if you're happy now. So that's why it's my motto.
Oh, that's a wonderful motto. Well, Angel, how can people find out more about you and your work?
You can find out about me on my website, frenchfluency.net, and on every major social media. That would be at French Fluency. And of course, my name is Angèle Pretot. So if you type that in Google, you'll also find me.
We've been speaking about dreams and language with Angel Pretot. I hope you've enjoyed today's program. If so, please hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on any future episodes. Until next time, this is Debbie Spector Weissman saying, sweet dreams, everybody.